There are educators who teach about dementia care, and then there are educators who make you feel understood. Adria Thompson is one of the rare ones who does both. She brings the clinical skill of a speech language pathologist with the insight of someone who has spent years with people with dementia, and also the clarity of a teacher who just knows how to teach simply. And that's why I wanted to have today's conversation. Adria, thank you so much for being here. Could you give me a little bit of a background of your speech pathology journey and how you came to be here?
Yeah. And thanks for that intro. That was so kind. Yeah, absolutely. So I graduated with my master's degree in 2014 from Eastern Kentucky University. And for about 8 years, I worked in long-term care communities. So I worked in nursing homes, memory care, assisted living. I did some home health and even in hospitals. And most people don't understand what a speech therapist, which is the same thing as a speech language pathologist for anyone listening. A lot of people don't understand what our role is when working with people with dementia. And so we often say that there's like 3 main big areas that we help with. One is communication, which is what most people are familiar with. And then also swallowing disorders. So any problems with chewing, swallowing, and then also cognition, which is the complex thinking tasks that we have to have. And individuals with dementia often will have difficulty with all 3 of those things at some point. And so many of the patients I worked with over the course of those 8 years in long-term care were people with dementia. That might not be what I was treating them for, but certainly they also were just happened to be living with dementia. And over the course of my career, I started feeling like, first of all, I wasn't prepared to serve people with dementia well. And then secondly, even with the things that I thought I was trying to do right, didn't feel like it was making much of a difference. And so around 5 years into that, I started really feeling like I needed to sharpen my skills on behalf of my patients with dementia. And so I started taking every course I could get my hands on. And it was around the same time that my grandmother started showing signs of dementia. So it was a culmination of like professionally and personally, dementia became a really big part of my life and certainly is now where I've specialized in and am pouring the rest of my career and my life into.
That's beautiful. So you didn't feel equipped at first, and that was your signal to go and get the education that you needed and take all the courses. And now on the other side of taking that and working with patients over the years, do you feel a little bit more equipped and a little bit more of like an expert in this field?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I've learned so much. I have so much still to learn. I think the thing that that really made a big difference for me is to start listening to my patients with dementia and really like not just, auditorily listening, but reading their body language, looking at what they're trying to communicate to me. Because often we are looking to outside sources to try to figure out how to care for someone with dementia. And I think that a lot of my content, and what I believe is a lot of the answers are in front of you. You just have to be present with them. And so that really took a big perspective shift, I think. I wanted to be an expert in the clinical sense and in the scholarly sense. But I think what made me learn the most was just being present with someone with dementia. And doing that hundreds of times over the course of 8 years just has given me a lot of experiences to pull from.
And I think that's what's really great about your content is that you have so much background and knowledge. But the way that you teach, it's so easy to understand, especially for somebody like me who has nothing, like I don't have any experience with dementia. I don't work with dementia patients, but to watch your content and to see how simply you teach other people how to maybe interact with somebody with dementia or help out a family member who might have dementia, you make the information so easily digestible. And I think that's why a lot of people gravitate towards you. And I think that is a skill that is really hard for people to master. So I just want to congratulate you for being able to teach so simply.
Thank you. And it's wild. I mean, it's certainly a gift I think I have because I can look back and even into like when I was taking calculus in high school, like my friends would get together after class, like before a test, and I would be the one, like one of my friends had a whiteboard and I would learn best from reteaching the content to other people. So instead of just like studying our notes, I would just stand up and be like, let me explain this to you in the way that I have understood it. And just practicing that over and over again. I've always been told in many different areas, even before I started doing this, that I can make complex things simple. And so in this space of dementia care, that's valuable. And I love doing it. And I'm now a professor too. So that's like, I get to flex that muscle every single day in many different capacities.
I was watching your TED Talk and you referenced a moment where a man didn't know that he had Alzheimer's because the doctor didn't clearly say what it was that he was experiencing. Why do you think stuff like this happens? Like, why do you think doctors are not blunt about saying the word Alzheimer's or dementia? And what do you think families, what is the drawback of that?
Thanks for watching my TED Talk. Yeah, I think, the whole point of that talk is to say the word dementia. And I think that the stigma around the word dementia and the concept of having dementia is that's what's keeping doctors from giving the diagnosis in the moment. That's what is keeping people from getting a diagnosis or going to a doctor for themselves. That's what's keeping caregivers isolated because they don't want to go to church and tell other people that, oh, the reason why you haven't seen my husband is because he has dementia. The idea that someone could change so much of what other people know of them, right? Like when someone has dementia, their personality can change. They might lose memories. They might not be able to identify people as well. Their communication can be impacted. And often those are the very things that we use to connect with people. We see someone we know from the past and we start telling all these stories and we start referencing people we have in common. And a lot of that is communication too. And so when someone changes in their capacity to engage in that kind of connection, then for whatever reason, it's become like shameful and it's become embarrassing. And so saying that you have dementia or talking about dementia is a scary and very highly stigmatized conversation. And so I think, and I mean, I say I think, but I also have seen in research that is a huge reason why doctors are not diagnosing or actually telling people that they have a diagnosis is because they have also fallen into the stigma as well.
Is there any advice that you give to families who feel shameful after a diagnosis?
I think education is just like the key to so many things in dementia care. If we can educate other people about what dementia actually is and that it's not contagious, it's not anything that is the person who has its fault, and it has not changed innately the person that they are. If we can educate the world, if everyone had a better understanding of dementia, I think that stigma would go away. It's just all misunderstandings. It's misinterpretations of what they've seen in the past or even in media. And so that's why I believe that education is so powerful in this space to make a difference.
When you first meet a new dementia patient, is there a framework that you're working with when you're approaching the situation?
Yeah. So in my capacity as a speech language pathologist, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
So when I first meet someone with dementia, I usually do not introduce myself as a speech language pathologist. I will just say, hi, I'm Adria. It's nice to meet you. Tell me about yourself. And so I ask some open-ended questions at the beginning that helps me get a glimpse into their cognitive abilities, who they say they are in context of what space I'm finding them in. Because a lot of times I find that if I come in guns blazing, I'm a speech language pathologist, I'm here to test your cognition, they don't want any part of that. So I would rather be a friendly face and a conversational partner that feels really safe. And if I find that in our conversation, they're oriented enough to understand what a speech therapist might be, or that they identify the fact that they might have some deficits and they're aware of them, then we will certainly engage in a conversation about who I am and what I'm doing. But I feel that out pretty, I give enough time for building rapport to figure that out before I give them all of that information. So, and I think that's important. Like, we can take lessons from that just as like people, is to, when you engage with someone with dementia, is to, of course, not ask them if they know who you are, but to just feel out the conversation and see what their capacity is and match them, mirror their abilities,
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that there's a lot that we can learn from these interactions, because I was watching a ton of your content yesterday, and a lot of comments that I saw were, well, isn't this common sense? Like, isn't this how you're just supposed to treat people in general and not just people with dementia? Which I thought was really interesting. Something that I also thought was interesting was your view on safety and independence. I have certainly found myself, when I was caring for my grandmother, wanting to do mostly everything for my grandmother and not letting her have a sense of independence. And this was something that had to change later in my caregiving journey. I think we're, and I've heard you say this, we're coming from a good place of trying to help and make sure they're safe and make sure they don't fall and all these things. But then you kind of strip away someone's independence. How do you find the balance between the two?
You can't. And that's what makes caregiving so hard. And I would throw in a third thing. So I think we're always balancing independence, safety, and joy, or comfort, whatever word we might want to use to attach to that. I talk to caregivers about this a lot in like consultations, because I find that the friction that they feel of like this care that I'm doing is not working, or we're in a situation where something has to change. Often I find that at the foundation of that, it's that they have not identified what the priority is. Is the priority for the person they love with dementia to be independent? Is the priority for them to be safe? Or is the priority for them to have comfort or joy? And if we can identify what your priority is, and ideally what the person with dementia's priority is for themselves, if they're capable of that conversation, then we can better figure out what the solution to the issue is. Because at no time are we equally prioritizing all three of those things. We have to make some trade-offs. So to give you an example, if someone all of a sudden is unsafe to drive, we're starting to see that they are making some choices in driving that are concerning. Then if we make the choice for them and everyone else in the town to be safe, then we are impacting both negatively their independence and their level of comfort. And so every time we're making decisions around one of those three things, we are in turn making a decision about the others. And so I don't think that there is a right or wrong. And I can say I know there is not a right or wrong choice to prioritize, because that can change over time. When someone's in the mild stages of dementia, we might prioritize their independence because they are capable of doing more. So we let them make a sandwich for themselves. We encourage them to take a walk around the block. But maybe a year later, 2 years later, we would never consider allowing that because it is so unsafe, or maybe they're just not capable of it. And so then safety becomes more of a priority. And then further down the line into their progression, we might just prioritize their comfort. We're not going to push them to be independent or wrap them in a bubble to keep them safe. We just want them to be happy. So it is a constant struggle to balance these three components in caregiving, and that's what makes it so hard.
Yesterday, as I was, doing some research and seeing all of the things that you've put out there, I was really interested by your trip to the Netherlands and seeing how I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name Hogeweyk.
Yeah, Hogeweyk. I don't know if I'm saying it right either, but that's what I landed on.
I thought what was really interesting was where independence is built into the town, and there are things that are, that could be deemed as unsafe in the town. Could you talk a little bit about the experience and the things that you still hold on to from that trip?
Yeah. So outside of Amsterdam, in a small town, there is the first dementia village. And that's called the Hogeweyk. I don't know if I'm saying it right either. I usually just try to say it quick enough to people can't spell, But yeah, I had the opportunity last year to go and tour, and I've seen features on CNN and other news stations about this dementia village. And essentially, yes, it is a village. It's a few square blocks that is secure, meaning that there's either locked doors or walls or buildings around it to where the person living inside is not going to just wander out into the rest of the city. But within this village, they have theaters, they have restaurants, they have a place to get your hair cut, they have maintenance shops. I mean, you name it, they've got it. And everyone living in this village has dementia. And there were a few misunderstandings I had about it. I assumed that everyone living in this community had pretty moderate or pretty mild, maybe moderate dementia, but I figured that they were all really mild because I saw the level of independence it seemed though that they had. Like my concept of someone with dementia going to a grocery store, I think that they have to be really mild. But once we got there in the Netherlands, this is actually what's considered a skilled nursing facility. And so they are providing a full skilled nursing level of care. So in the Netherlands, the government pays for this kind of care. And so they have to be deemed severe enough to even be eligible to live there. So in reality, everyone in there has moderate to severe dementia. So it's kind of the other end of the spectrum. And that is really a big component of what made me think, oh, we can have independence, independence might look different in the later stages of dementia, but certainly it still can happen. And so it was a complete community that wasn't just realistic or wasn't village-like, it was real and it was a village. And there were actually people who worked there that supported them in every capacity. And so it wasn't just this like Truman Show kind of like bubble that they created for people to think that they're living in community. They really were. And they still, though, were balancing providing medical care and the level of skilled care that was needed. So it was really inspiring because I hadn't seen anything like that here in the United States.
Has that trip pushed you to try and create something similar with the places that you visit? There's
a lot of logistics that make something like that really difficult for the United States. And I'm not an operator of a long-term care community. I do not have that mindset, nor do I understand all that would go into that. Certainly not an avenue that my business is willing to go into at this point. But just to give you some thoughts that I had, as a speech therapist, I'm part of the rehabilitation team that includes physical, occupational therapy. And I've been taught from day one of my undergrad, which is to prioritize safety for our patients. We are trying to get them better to recover. And if they are unsafe, then that is not good, right? So when I went there, I'm looking around thinking, oh my gosh, there's cobblestones here. There is a pond in the middle of this landscaped area. There are fences that have points to them. There is a second floor balcony. I was looking at all the things that would be so problematic and could introduce some risk. And that's because I have the American safety mindset. And honestly, the level of liability and litigation, you've seen that if you suspect nursing home abuse and neglect commercials, which absolutely is important and has a place, but I think that there would be a lot of concerns for a person to open up a village with the level of independence that's possible. It would be looked at as a liability. And culturally, in the Netherlands, it's just not looked at like that. Like death is not looked at like something that needs to be prevented by all means. So they're more embracing of risk. That's part of being an adult and that's just life. So there's some things that would need to be overcome, I think.
Something that I've seen in the comment section and just from the families that I talk to on a daily basis is there's a lot of breakdown with communication and connection between a family member and another family member who is experiencing dementia or has dementia. And they struggle with communication in general. One of the most heartbreaking things that I've seen in your comment section is caregivers saying stuff like, if my loved one can't remember who I am, well, then what's the point of me visiting them? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I think that it's totally natural to be curious about what people with dementia know and what they don't. And to be curious about whether they know your name in this moment or they recognize you, or are they capable of telling the story that we've heard them tell in the past. And so when it comes to these kind of questions about visiting someone with dementia, what ends up happening a lot of times is that people will use these opportunities to quiz, interrogate, assess perhaps someone with dementia. And that's can be disappointing for the person with dementia because they are maybe not capable to engage in that way. But also that's not normal life conversation. Like I would never go to lunch with my friends and quiz them about things. It doesn't feel familiar and it feels threatening. And so I think that that's a component too, where we let our curiosities make us, you mentioned earlier about things being common sense. Unfortunately, when it comes to people with dementia, we often don't act with common sense when we engage with them. We don't interact with them as we would other humans. And so it does require me to say, hey, like be kind to them. So, and circling back to the question about like, should we visit them if they don't remember? I think that we need to consider the benefits of connecting and socializing with people. Number one, socialization has been shown to actually improve cognitive performance and prevent decline. It's a pillar of brain health. And research has showed that people who are socially engaged perform cognitively better for longer than those who are withdrawn. So that's certainly a consideration that it's actually good for their cognition to be with other people. I think also, though, if we think about the feelings that we get when we are with our people and we are amongst people we feel safe with and loved, this is not just an exchange of information. This is not a transaction. It is a full body experience. And you know in yourself, listener, that when you leave a joyful moment with someone you love, you carry that feeling in your chest. You feel it for the rest of the day. And even if someone with dementia cannot recall the details of the transactional information that was shared in the moment, they still have the ability to carry the joyful feeling. And that can make an impact on the rest of their day. And certainly if they are consistently being engaged with and feeling love from other people, they will carry that with them forever. So I think that's important.
So if somebody listening right now is about to visit a parent or grandparent with dementia that they haven't seen in a while, how should the first 60 seconds of that interaction in a perfect world, how would that go?
So first we would enter in with good energy. So if you walk in the room scared to death and nervous, everybody's going to feel that. So put a smile on your face in the hallway before you walk into the room. And then next, introduce yourself. And it might feel kind of weird, but you can do it in a way that feels natural. Like sometimes when visiting my grandmother, I'll knock and say, "Hi, can you believe Adria came to see you today?" while pointing to myself. And so that just allows them to hear my name and connect it with my face. And so I think, whether it's, "Hi, it's Adria," or "Can you believe Adria came to see you?" is like the perfect introduction. And then also getting it within their line of sight. So don't stand across the room. Don't stand over them. Really sitting down next to them and make sure that they can see you if they have good visual abilities. I think that's the 60 seconds, right? Like just being present and joyful.
Are there any tips that you can give to families? Because I know you can give them the script, but like acting out the script or like following the script is really difficult for people. Like they don't want to become this new person to this person that they might have known for their whole life.
Well, and I think it's important too to consider that even if they might not catch on immediately who you are or how you're related or like what kind of relationship you have, doesn't mean that they won't. Because I find a lot, and Chris, I don't know if you've experienced this too, but with my own grandmother, is that she might not have any idea who someone is, but give her 5 minutes into the conversation and all of a sudden she's like, oh, like you start to realize that she's connecting the dots. And so I think that's important for people to know too, because we think that they have to take so much time to process when you're living with dementia. The brain takes longer to catch up. And so just because they might not know who you are in the moment and you feel like you're becoming this different version of yourself, that doesn't mean that there might not be a point in the conversation where that connection is made. Is that something you've ever experienced?
Yeah, with my grandmother and with myself, like sometimes I don't remember who you are, and it takes me a little bit to like, oh yeah, we went to middle school together. Like it'll be like 10 minutes into the conversation, and then I'll remember. So I think it's just it's a human thing. It's not just a dementia exclusive experience, which I think is really interesting. That like there's a sort of switch that goes on when we know that somebody has dementia, and now it's like, oh, now I have to have a completely different interaction with this person, when really it's like, if we just lead with like love and kindness and not try to like be a brand new person to this person. Obviously there are some refinements that could be made, but I think a lot of it is common sense when interacting with people with dementia. There are things that I have seen in the comment section of your videos and my videos also, of people not knowing how to respond if they've heard these things. And I just wanted to get your take on some of these. The first one is if a parent or a grandparent or a family member is saying that they haven't seen you in a long time, and they might have just seen them yesterday or last week. Like what could a family member do in a situation like that?
I think first acknowledging the fact that sucks to hear, especially if you have been present, because that kind of further the belief of, well, then what's the point in me coming if they're going to accuse me that I never come? So I want to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, that's a sucky thing to hear, and it feels very uncomfortable in that moment. But if someone is saying, I never see you, you never come around, I encourage you to translate that statement into the feeling behind it. So I want to respond to the feeling that they have. And so we might translate that, I never see you, you never come, to meaning I'm feeling lonely and I miss you. And so if we can imagine that someone is saying that, then our response would be, oh my goodness, I've missed you so much. And I'm so glad to be with you here now. And that's so important. That is so important, because when someone is experiencing memory loss, they don't know the facts. They don't know that you've been there, but they're just saying the easiest thing that comes out to relate to the feeling that they're having.
Another one was getting accused of maybe stealing something that they might have forgotten where they put the thing.
Accusations of stealing are really common for someone with short-term memory loss, because for us, if we hide something or put something somewhere and then we can't find it later, once we stumble upon it, we have this feeling of like, oh yeah, that's right. That's where I put it. I shouldn't have put it there. But when they come across something, they have no recollection, no recall at all that they were ever the ones that put it there. So the only explanation that makes sense to their brain is that someone else did. And it must be you because you are around. And so you are a target. So when someone accuses you of that, once again, we want to respond to the feelings rather than the facts. And so if they're saying, you've stolen this from me, why would you take that? You need to respond with as though they're saying, I have missed these things that I couldn't find and it's upset me. And so our response might sound something like, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry you're upset that you can't find this thing. That would make me really upset too if I couldn't find something important to me. I'm going to work with you to try to find it. Where should we start looking?
And the last one, and this is something that I struggled with my grandmother, is asking for relatives who have died. What are some tips that you can give family members who are hearing that?
Yeah, this is really hard because it really depends on where they might be in the stages of dementia. But our response to them asking about someone who has died needs to be reflective of what they think has happened or who or where that person might be. So my best tip for this situation is to ask a question in return before answering. So if they say, where is James? Then I would say, I'm not sure. Where do you think he might be? So that would give us the idea of sometimes, like my own grandmother at the beginning of her dementia would ask about people who had passed. And when I would respond asking her where she thought they would be, she would say, well, I think someone told me they died, but I'm not sure. And then I can confirm, yeah, you're right, they did. That's really sad. I know you miss them a lot. But then it became, well, I don't know. He was just here and now I don't see him. That gives us insight to know that they have no understanding that the person has passed and that they have been passed for a while. Like this is a different ball game. And so my response could look like, I'm not sure. I haven't seen them. And then you can ask a question that would allow them to talk about that person in a more positive sense. So, oh, where's your mom? I'm not sure. I haven't seen her, but tell me about your mom. Do people tell you that you look like your mom or your dad? Was your mom a good cook? Right? So we can still stay on the topic, because if we translate what they're saying of where's my mom, they're actually saying, I miss my mom. And so we can allow them to still scratch the itch of wanting to be close to them by having a good, fuzzy feeling conversation about them. And then some caregivers might choose to completely lie, and that's totally fine too. We could say, well, your mom's at the grocery store, or, your mom is at the doctor's office. If that's something that brings peace and comfort, and that is our priority for the person we love, then that is perfectly fine as well.
I want to get into some care hacks. I don't really like the word hack. It's just the best word that I can come up with to describe these videos that you've come up with that are really helping tons of people. One of them is hacks for getting your loved one to drink. I think the cues that you have given in these videos, like, I'd like to make a toast, or can you taste this and tell me what you think? I think stuff like that it's so brilliant. Could you talk a little bit about the science behind them, if you know the science, and why do you think these work so well?
Yeah. So when I think about how to make caregiving tasks easier, I always help people to think about how can we make it make sense to the person with dementia. So if we want them to drink water and they think they already have, there is absolutely no benefit in arguing to the death about the fact that they've only drank 3.7 ounces in the last 3 days. It's just not going to be helpful. And so if they have a belief, if someone with dementia has a belief about why a care task doesn't need to happen, maybe they already did it or they'll do it later, perhaps, then we need to make it make sense for them right now. And so how can we create a situation in which it feels much more natural? And it's not confrontational. It's not, hey, do this thing, because that feels way too authoritative. And so when it comes to the examples you gave about water, we need to think about, well, when is a time in our lives that we naturally would drink water? And that's when a good example is when we pick up a glass and we say, cheers. Often it's not water, but we might tap glasses and drink. And so the science behind that really is essentially, that is a procedural memory. So when someone, there are two main types of memory. There's long-term memory, which that can be pulled out into 4 or 5 different types of memory. But essentially long-term memories are the things that we have experienced for a long time over our lives. And one component of long-term memory is procedural memory. This is that motor memory where we see someone with dementia who can play a beautiful piece on the piano, but not even know that they can play the piano, or that they can they can do the dance that they used to do as a ballerina from a long time ago. We've seen viral videos of those things. But procedural memory also can be when we put a toothbrush up to our teeth, when a toothbrush is put in our hand, or when we pull up our pants after we've gone to the bathroom. All of those things that are just innate in us. And those are retained for a long, long time. And so when we are tapping into cheers and things like that, we are tapping into procedural long-term memory that their brain is comfortable with and is familiar with and has done a million times.
Another thing that I was thinking about, and this is a part that I'm super passionate about, because when my grandmother was alive, there were many tasks or jobs that I gave my grandmother. One of them was, like, I would ask her to fold napkins for me because she loved napkins and she thought she was doing it for the rest of the family. And I've seen you talk about giving family members or patients these jobs to make them feel included or to give them a sense of purpose. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. We can call these tasks that are like everyday tasks that feel like they are fulfilling a purpose and that they are familiar to them. We can call these Montessori-based activities. And we're familiar a lot of times with the term Montessori as it relates to children and education, and that is foundationally where this concept comes from. But it's the hands-on learning in a space that has been set up already for a person to be successful. And that can be an entire deep dive that I could talk about for an hour. But essentially, these Montessori-based activities are things that a person has done 1,000 times over their life that does play into that procedural memory. But the important thing is when we are asking someone with dementia to participate in this task, that we don't set it up as though, hey, do this thing because I heard about it on a podcast and it'll keep you busy for 30 minutes, right? The most important part of a task like this is to look at them and say, hey, I could use your help. I need you to do this for me. And that's exactly what you're describing, what you did with your grandma, right? Like, I need you to fold these towels. And she believed she was doing it for the family. And that is so important because so many times people with dementia lose the ability to feel like they're giving back, that they're serving a purpose, that they are important. And so there are thousands of activities we could have them do. Some of my favorites include matching plastic containers and their lids, because how many of us have cabinets in our house with a million different containers of different colors and shapes and sizes, and we can say, take them all apart and say, oh, I'm so annoyed. Can you see if all of these containers have a lid? And if they don't, we're going to throw it out. Or sorting sugar packets of different colors. That's something that feels very familiar for a lot of people. Maybe someone who wears glasses, we could give them several different pairs of glasses to clean so that they can be given back to the person they belong to. Stuffing envelopes, matching socks, sorting or folding towels. I love getting travel pamphlets from like a roadside thing with like all the things that go on in the town. Grab several of those and have them match them together of the ones that are alike. Or you can go through and say, hey, find something cool for us to do this weekend with the kids. So anything in life, there are so many free things in life that we can create activities. And the most important thing is just that we give them that purpose and the why that we need them to help us. Another
thing that caregivers struggle with is getting their loved one or patient to eat. And I've seen you talk about saving fast food wrappers or containers and putting food in there because the fast food looks familiar. Are there any other eating hacks that you can give caregivers to help their loved ones eat easier or eat in general? Because I think it's harder for, it's hard for people to eat.
Yeah. So I think one thing that is probably underrated is the difference in portion sizes now versus maybe when someone who might be older living with dementia is used to from their childhood. So the reason I bring that up is because, like I said, those long-term memories will stay with them much longer than short-term memories. So they'll start relating back to things that feel familiar from their childhood. So, for example, when I was working in memory care, we had so many, especially ladies, who would be served a full dinner plate of delicious food, right? We might have a beautiful grilled piece of chicken and some broccoli and rice, and it's completely filled up the whole plate. And some have verbally expressed this, but also some have just pushed it away, but they just say, oh, that's too much. That's too much. And so they don't eat it at all. And so many times, especially working in memory care where we had many people with dementia at a meal at a time, we would just take smaller plates and give them just a very small serving, a few pieces of the food. We'd set it down in front of them and they would eat that. They would feel more approachable to them. And then once they were done, we'd take the plate away, wait 5 minutes, and serve them again. And so eventually they could eat the same amount of food, but it just doesn't feel so overwhelming. So that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't always consider. But secondly, there's a lot of visual things that happen when someone has dementia, so visual perception. And so we need to consider how busy the environment is around them. And so a lot of times we will use red plates because research tells us that contrasting color, especially red, underneath food is more stimulating, and it allows them to see the food easier. Now, if you're serving strawberries on a red plate, that's not going to be helpful, but most foods are a different color from that. And then the last thing I would say is to consider what habits or routines they might have had around meal times in the past. And so sometimes, especially when I was in memory care, we would notice people wouldn't eat. And upon investigation, it was because they said not everyone had their plate. And they might have been, I'm from the South, so we are taught these, they might have been taught some routines of like, you don't eat until everyone has their food. And so because they look around and they see aides and nurses not eating, they feel like they can't dig in yet. Or maybe they're waiting for a prayer to be said because they've always prayed before their meal. And so they're not eating because it hasn't been blessed. So I think those are probably the three things: is portion sizes, can they see the food, and then what routines are around the food that they might be waiting for.
Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about the guilt or the shame that families might have when first hearing a diagnosis, or even if it's been some time since they've heard the diagnosis. And I've heard you talk about the importance of maybe placing a family member in a nursing home or in memory care. Some families have a really difficult time with trying to make this decision because they feel like everything should happen in the home. Is there any advice that you can give to families that are considering?
I think that a lot of times as a caregiver, they will make decisions based on guilt, the presence or absence of guilt, right? So we start to have conversations about maybe dad needs to go to a nursing home, and that makes them feel really guilty. So they take that feeling as confirmation that it's not the right thing to do. And so then we start deciding, well, maybe we just bring caregivers into the home. And then once we do that, dad hates it. And then we feel guilty. And so we make the decision that because we feel guilty, we decide that that was the wrong thing to do. And unfortunately, when you are responsible for the livelihood of another human being, you will feel guilt, period. And there is no right or wrong decision in caregiving. And then we convince ourselves, caregivers can often convince themselves, well, the only answer is for me to do it, despite the toll it's taking on myself and everyone else around us. I have seen that in my own family and many families and many caregivers I've worked with. I know that it sucks to feel like there is not a clear answer, but unfortunately, it's just the reality of caregiving. And so my advice when it comes to like considering how to provide care and when to shift and when to change things and maybe when to consider care communities is to be open, to be fully open. We talked about the stigma of dementia earlier. There certainly is a stigma of long-term care too. And this stigma is founded in terrible stories that we have heard from 1973 of, Aunt Shelby who had a terrible situation. But I can assure you, after spending a decade in long-term care, that there have been some amazing changes. And certainly there are places and people who might not be great in long-term care, but there are certainly places and people in long-term care that are angels, that are amazing. The most compassionate, wonderful people on this planet I have met inside of care communities. And so we need to release the stigma that care communities or getting care from outside people is a bad or negative or like a failure. Because often for so many people with dementia, it provides them the routine and the support and the medical care that they desperately need. And many, many people with dementia thrive in care communities because it provides them cognitive stimulation, socialization, and a routine that is the same every day. And that's so helpful for so many people living with cognitive impairment.
I think it's unfortunate that the bad get broadcasted, and rightfully so. I think we shouldn't be giving business to these facilities who aren't treating their patients with the utmost respect and the best care that they can possibly do. And I think it's also on us to talk about the good. I've been to facilities that are amazing with some amazing employees and staff, and they are I've called them angels before, and I've gotten some backlash. They're like, I'm not an angel, but they're amazing people, and they really care for the people that they're helping out. And I think I don't know. I think we should talk about the good as much as we talk about the bad, because there are many. I mean, memory care aside, there are good establishments and there are bad establishments. And I think we need to highlight the ones that are good. And I think that's why the work that you do is so important, because I feel like when people see people like you who care and who have such great energy when interacting, I think it gives people hope that there are people who can care for their loved ones. They don't have to stay at the home.
If someone wants to come at me about how terrible care communities are, I am a product of one. Like, that's where I received all of my training and experience. So it's hard for me to hold both to be true. For someone to say care communities are terrible, but I love what you do, because I'm like, well, and I understand, like you said, there are reputations that are deserved. But my best advice is just to remain open-minded about the whole process. Because there's great places out there.
For the families who are walking out of a doctor's office right now, who just received the diagnosis, and they're sitting in the car and they're confused about what their situation is and they have no hope in them, is there anything that you'd want them to know in that moment? And then I guess the next 3 steps that they would take?
I think the most important thing to know is that the person that you love will be living with dementia. It's not a diagnosis that they're just dying from dementia, right? Like, there's so much life that still is to be had in spite and during the diagnosis. And I think my 3 tips would, number 1, have a lot of grace with yourself and the person who just got this diagnosis, because I've talked to so many people with dementia who say, well, like, year 1, I just threw the biggest pity party for myself. And, it was just, it took them time to get to the point where they were like, you know what, I'm going to make the most out of this. I'm going to advocate, or whatever path they choose. And so have grace, have patience, because it is very much a process to figure all of that out and what that looks like and what that means. Secondly, educate yourself. When you're ready, consume as much education as you feel comfortable. So understanding what is happening in the brain of someone you love, or even in yourself, is really important. And knowing a little bit about what is to come. You don't have to know what the whole rigmarole is going to be and every step of the way from today to the very last day, but just know about today and a little bit down the road, at least. Because what happens is, when we are unprepared and uneducated about what the next stage of dementia might look like, then there's just a lot of frustration, a lot of confusion, a lot of friction that happens until you get to the point where you're like, oh, this is to be expected. This is normal. This is not their fault. They're doing the best they can. And this is just a natural part of progression. And, I think the third is probably the first that most doctors say, which is like, plan for the future, get your affairs in order. But there certainly are, right after a diagnosis, there are some things that you can do now that is really going to be important for you down the road. So for the person with dementia, to determine who their power of attorneys are going to be, both medical and financial, but also to have conversations about long-term care, about what they want for themselves down the road. And even like advanced directives, like, it's not just full code, which means, like, do everything possible to keep me alive versus do not resuscitate when you just let nature take its course. There's a lot of things in between there. And so I just encourage you to talk to some professionals, but also there's a lot of really great resources online, some organizations that can help you think through the things you need to do and the things that you need to talk about. And one of those being the Conversation Project. They're a nonprofit organization that does have some good resources about how to have those conversations and what things to do.
Yeah, which I think, that third piece is something that I have been trying to figure out. I feel like everybody needs to get their affairs in order. I think we need to have these conversations, and we need to figure out what's going to happen when I do come across this bridge. If I'm going to cross it, what's going to happen? Like, what is my family going to experience? What is my spouse going to experience? And after speaking to so many elder law attorneys, every time I leave those conversations, I'm like, oh yeah, I need to get my affairs in order. And I still haven't. And so having conversations like this is always a reminder that this is not just for when you get to this stage. Like, this is something that we should all be preparing for. So I'm going to ask a big question, and it's okay if it's like, if you haven't really thought about this yet, but if you could rebuild the entire system from scratch, is there anything that you would change first, and what would it look like if you had the power to redesign the system?
Of dementia care in general? Big question, Chris.
The responsibility is all yours.
Well, yeah, the big responsibility. I think foundationally, whatever needs to happen with dementia care, if we were to change everything, it would have to start with listening to people with dementia. I think that too many policies and procedures and regulations and standards have been created by people who think they know what people with dementia want. And I think that the best version of dementia care is created by people who actually have gotten the diagnosis and are looking at it in the face, and they can say what it is they want. So it might be a cop-out to say that I would not make the decision, but I think that that would be my decision, is to put an advisory board together of people with dementia who would make dementia care in America, in the world, a better system.
I think that's the best answer that you could have came up with, honestly. Well, Adria, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I want to give you some encouragement that the work that you do online and in person with the patients that you help, the seeds that you're planting in people and the hope that you give people is so encouraging to me. And it feels so good to know that there are people like you on this earth who just want to help and who do it in such a graceful way.
Thank you. Thanks for acknowledging it, for seeing it. It's the biggest honor.